Hello and welcome to Let the Bird Fly, a podcast about living freely in a world given back to us. This is Wade here in the podcast studio, the revamped, constantly improving and changing podcast studio with my dear friend and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Michael Berg. And we are going to be talking today, probably briefly, it's finals week, we've got stuff going, but we're going to be talking today about the Ascension of our Lord. And I would like, Michael, for us to talk about that. Ascension seems like a day where we're celebrating Jesus leaving, but it's actually a time when we ought to celebrate his presence as well. That he is still with his church and yet in a different way. And connected with that, with his presence in the church and how he's present, what that means for what ministry is, and what the church is for and what shepherds are called to do. Does that sound fair, Michael?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of the, let's say, underestimated festivals in the church year, right? And it's one of my favorite festivals in the church year, and it's kind of unfortunate that it falls in a nice May day often. And people, they don't remember that Thursday should be celebrated. And so the attendance is not great, but that's okay. You get your faithful there and you can really do some good stuff with the sermon.
You know what I'm excited for, Michael? Our circuit is doing a joint Ascension service. You know where they're doing that? On Thursday, Ascension Day at 6:30 p.m.?
St. Lucas?
No, that'd be a
St.
good
John's?
choice. That would be a great choice, too.
Centennial?
That would be an excellent choice.
Christ?
Oh, that would be a good choice.
St.
as well.
Peter?
That would also. Resurrection Lutheran Church on Howard Avenue, just off Howell, 6:30 p.m. on Ascension Day, which is what? May 14th.
May 14th.
5 pastors participating. If you're in the area, we'd love to have you there. I heard the preacher is questionable but very handsome.
I would have reversed that, but whatever.
That's probably true. Well, Michael, if you don't mind, would you mind giving us our disclaimer? And we are still learning how to do the video and the audio. So while you do the disclaimer, or wait, you're going to pause?
No.
Okay. While you do this disclaimer, I'm going to lightly play our music in the background.
Okay. This show doesn't speak for our churches, our church bodies, or our employers. To be honest, much of the time, it probably doesn't speak for us. We'll be thinking out loud a lot, so approach what you hear with a healthy skepticism, because, well, as a responsible resident of planet Earth, it's probably what you should generally do with almost everything. If you find yourself getting too worked up, tune out, look around, and realize you were just listening to a podcast. That's right, a podcast. So go live free, friends, and don't let us get in the way.
Well, Michael, that will take us to our main topic, which I am hopefully slowly fading into, which is the Ascension of our Lord. And that is coming up. So this Sunday will be Easter 6. And these last 2 Sundays have us in John chapter 14. And John chapter 14 is very hard to preach on, I think, because you're very tempted to chase after abstractions. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. All these big concepts. But I talked about on Sunday, at its core, it's about who Jesus is and that he's come to bring us somewhere, right? That he has work he's going to be carrying out yet. And so we have these 2 readings where Jesus, before his passion, is talking about what will happen with his resurrection and ascension. And then we have Ascension Day, and we talk about what did happen and what that means for us. Ascension falls in the Easter season, so we're still celebrating the resurrection. But if maybe I'll throw it to you first, Michael. When you mentioned the Ascension, one of your favorite festivals, it is for me too. What are the sorts of things that come for you? If you're looking forward to this festival, you were teaching this to your people, you're thinking of themes that come up in preaching or hymns, what would be the sort of things that come to mind for you with the Ascension of our Lord?
Yeah, there's a couple fun things, maybe just one fun thing just to begin with. It's 40 days since Jesus' resurrection. And if you even have a cursory knowledge of Bible history, you know that 40 is a number that you see throughout the Bible. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, 40 years in the wilderness. Jesus, 40 days in that same wilderness. With Elijah, there's a bunch of 40s, and they're all sort of negative. And they're negative in the sense from the viewpoint of a theologian of glory. Trial, tribulation, these sorts of things. But as a theologian of the cross, you know that God was working on us and on Elijah and on people in his alien work so that he can do his proper work. And I like to point out that after the 40 days of Lent, because you don't count Sundays, right? Because Sundays are feast days. After the 40 days of Lent, then you have another 40 of his resurrection appearances before he ascends into heaven. And so God even redeems the number 40. How about that, you know? And so that's something you could play with a little bit, and I think there's some fruit there. But when I think of the Ascension, besides the beautiful hymns, I think of two things. One is, this is the application is really easy because you are the disciples going into the same crazy world that those original 11, plus maybe Mary, I think she was there, are going into. And you're going into looking around going, where is God? I can't see him. And the disciples must have looked up and saw Jesus ascend going, what are we going to do now? He's not walking around anymore. What are we supposed to do? And the second thing is that there are 5 promises, and some of them are also instructions, that Jesus leaves with them. So I call them the 5 Ascension promises, even though they didn't happen all right at the Ascension. The first one is, I will be with you to the very end of the age. And remember, maybe we can go through them one by one if you want. I'll be with you to the very end of the age. I'm preparing heaven for you. I'm going to come back to get you. I will send the Spirit to teach you all things. That's 4. What's my 5th one? Did I say he'll come back for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'll rule all things for you, right? So I'll be with you to the very end of the age. I'm preparing heaven for you. I will rule all things for you. I will come back to get you, and I will send the Spirit to teach you all things. And so those 5 promises that were given, and if you're going through John in the Easter season, they're sort of there, right? These 5 promises were intended to give the disciples hope for this moment, for this time period between Jesus' ascension and his return. And so those are the same 5 promises that we hold on to. And when we think about Jesus ascending into heaven, he blesses them, right, as he ascends into heaven. And if you're at a church where above the altar there is the ascended Lord, right, with his hands up, like giving a blessing, and even if you don't, the pastor is giving you a blessing going out into the world, you really are like those original apostles receiving these promises and these blessings as you go out into the world, and these will sustain you. And so there's a lot of work you can do as a preacher with those 5 promises. And then, of course, there is then this idea they're supposed to stay and be witnesses. So there's a Pentecostal sort of spirit with the church, right? This is our job now. We are supposed to go out into the world with this Pentecost spirit. You will be my witnesses, which is, you could have a whole sermon just on witnesses, right? And the tie into martyrdom, but also the tie into this is not just a cult, a myth, a story. This is testimony of what actually happened. You will be my witnesses in Judea, Samaria, and in fact to the ends of the earth, right? And so I'm glad you mentioned that it's hard preaching the Easter season, which seems so weird because Easter's awesome.
And the narrative texts aren't as bad as some of them that are like unpacking things, because it can almost, you're tempted to treat Easter as an abstraction then, which is the opposite of how you want to treat it.
Yeah, and it's tough to preach because the resurrection message is pretty simple. Yeah. I had somebody give me advice, not me personally, but somewhere online. You're having trouble on Easter 5 and 6, right? Really dig into the hymns, because the hymns are great and you'll find inspiration there. And the reason I say that, like, sometimes it's tough preaching through the Easter season. I mean, Easter's great. If you're following Easter 2 is Thomas, that's great. Depending on what pericope, Easter 3 or 4 is Good Shepherd, okay, that's it. But the other 5, 6, 7, those can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
But then you get to Ascension, it's all there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably, I found it was the easiest sermon to preach, because there's just so much there. It's one of those occasions where you're like, I got to cut stuff out. I'm not looking to like build something up, which you should never have to do. But we know how our thinking goes.
Well, and Ascension Day was so important for the early church, the ancient church. I think sometimes we don't think enough about the significance of Christ now being seated at the right hand of God, and the last promise you mentioned, the reigning, the ruling, the governing all things on our behalf. And when it seemed for the ancient church in persecution or another hardship, or just many of them had hard lives. Like we think of, service is 9 a.m. I mean, that is what it is at Resurrection Lutheran Church on Howard Avenue, just off Howell. But you can find out more about that at rlcmilwaukee.org. But, when the early church worshiped, when people could get there, they didn't have Sundays off. You had the Roman work week. Sometimes they were gathering way late at night, sometimes very early in the morning. And it was hard to be a Christian. It was hard to hear the word. And so this message that Christ was seated at the right hand of God and governing all things for your good, I would guess similar to some of the work that you've done with pastors in Africa, Michael, and that you'll be doing. It just hits different when things aren't as easy, or when you have less control over planning everything out. Right? We look at our 401k. We can somewhat plan out our week. We know when our car bill is due. But when you're more dependent, when you're more subject to circumstances or others who are in authority directly over you, or the seasons or the weather or economic fluctuations, the Ascension is a very important festival.
Yeah, I think glad you brought that up for a couple of reasons. One is, okay, if the power went out in Milwaukee on Saturday night and didn't come back on until Sunday afternoon, okay, that would be sort of a pain, but it'd be like, remember that time?
Right.
Well, there are plenty of people in the world right now where you don't know if that's going to be a day-to-day thing, if you're going to have the internet, if you're going to have power. It goes in and out, rolling blackouts, that kind of stuff. You don't know if your people are going to be able to get gas. Forget about if it's expensive or not. Is it even going to be available to you? So the day-to-day struggles of the people in Jesus' time and many people in history and even in our time, they have a daily understanding of what Christ is ruling. They're forced to grapple with the juxtaposition of the promise and the reality.
Right.
And that's very difficult for us.
And so the concept of providence is much more important for them.
Yeah, and I would suggest too, like, it's still applicable to us, of course. And for us, it's big power political things, right? And so we have such a hard time thinking that God is in control when our guy doesn't win the election, or when, like you said, the 401k takes a dip. And you're like, how could this even be? And it's good for us to remember our affluence, but it's also, how we said it so many times, pick up a history book once in a while and see that the church has survived things far more difficult than anything in the last 48 years we have dealt with. And I would suggest that even the whole world has dealt with that. And I include communism in there. The last 50 years was difficult.
Oh, the 20th century was, yeah.
And so it actually is quite remarkable that the church has not only survived, but has flourished.
Well, and I think I was going to bring this up next, and I'm glad you did.
And it ain't because of us.
Right. I think our particular setting makes us, and I do think it's important that we be thinking about demographics. How is the church doing? Does it make sense where we're doing what, all that? I don't mean to downplay that. And I do think it's good to be frank about the challenges and that we face and the opportunities that we have. So I'm not downplaying that either.
You have to do your job.
But I do think modern Western Christians have a special way of wringing their hands and panicking about the fate of the church, precisely because we're so used to controlling things, and I think because of sometimes our business model
Oh, for
or
sure.
what we take for granted, that the Ascension is a reminder that the church has staying power. Like it just keeps going, and that's not an excuse for us to be lazy, and that's not an excuse for us to not seize the moments we might have socially, culturally, intellectually. But I think that is a great comfort of Ascension as well, is to know that whatever the world and the devil and even the church has thrown at Christ and his church, it's endured. And, there's the old story about Napoleon threatening the French bishops that if they didn't play ball, he was going to destroy the church. And the bishop supposedly says that we've spent, 1,700 years trying to do that and failed. Good luck. That at the end of the day, Ascension brings us this great comfort that Christ actually is in control and has been in control, and the church will survive us, even as it survives so many others.
Yeah, when I think about those 5 Ascension promises, there's a part of me that wants to think that Jesus is being a little bit sarcastic at them. He's not, but I think there's something there when he says, okay, I'm going to rule all things like I always have. I'm preparing a place for heaven for you, you who I have loved since the beginning of time. I'm going to send the Spirit to teach you everything you need to know. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be with you, not in some Hallmark card way, but word, body, blood,
Yep.
vocation, hiding behind masks. And he almost says, do you really think, you dummies, that I'm not going to come back and get you?
Right. I'm going to forget about you.
That I'm not going to, do you understand that before the beginning of time, I knew you and loved you?
Right.
Do you know that I performed arguably the greatest miracle of all, taking on flesh because the infinite's in the finite, lived kind of a rough life, let alone a pretty sadistic and horrific death, the most horrific death of that time in a public way, and then have overcome all of this history. Are you really thinking that your bad grade, that your diabetes, that your political situation is somehow going to
trying to dial this right into me, the diabetes?
Do you really think that this little thing in your world right now is going to derail the whole thing?
Right.
It's actually really a bizarre tack to take, and a bizarre thing to believe, because all of the evidence, the fact that this earth is still spinning, the fact that the church has survived all of this, it's actually a really bizarre fact to hold on to think that somehow it's all going to get lost. And I think part of it is, well, we get stuck in the present, as we've talked about so many times before. In our particular age and culture, we're stuck with kind of in the present with generations and outcomes and assessments and the next election, the next cycle, the next whatever. We don't have a concept of overarching eras and times like other cultures do, and I think that hurts us. Again, this is sort of a modern chauvinism, but it's also, I think, a little bit of a hat tip to the idea that we're created in the image of God. We know that we're important, and we know that we were made to be complete, to be perfected, but also that we were made for righteousness. We were made for life to the full, which is another sort of Easter promise that you get in John. And they may have life and have life to the full. Like, we know we're made for this stuff, and we are discontent, and rightfully so, when our world does not live up to those promises that are written in our hearts, as Ecclesiastes says. Eternity is written in our hearts. And I believe, to be specific in our moment, so we're saying one thing, don't get too worked up in the moment. God's got it covered. But as you said before, that is not an excuse for not seizing the day in a particular moment. As modernity winds down, which is a scary thing, but it's also a time for opportunity. The major feel in the West right now is that the promises that were made in modernity have not come true in the way that we thought they would.
Right.
Now, there's a little ingratitude there, right? But at the same time, we were really predicting that we would have figured everything out by now, and we haven't. And so there is a collective discontent right now, and it's really ripe for, I would suggest, an ascension moment, an ascension sermon. So you should go to Resurrection Lutheran Church.
Ascension Day, 6:30 p.m., Howard Avenue, just off Howell.
All right.
Well, and I think, everybody wants an enduring kingdom, but they're looking to build it rather than receive it, and they're looking for it in the wrong place.
Everybody wants to be the preacher.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be the president. Yeah.
Yeah. And, but maybe two thoughts that we can build on if we have time, Michael. And the first is, you hit on this, excuse me, lo, I am with you always. That Christ leaves, they see him leave, and yet he's still present, and he's present in a very important way, in a way that can't be separated from his incarnation, from his presence during his earthly ministry. And then secondly, that he's gone to prepare a place for us, but there is a formative aspect to this, and now he's preparing us for that place. And, I've joked with you before, Michael, that I clearly don't believe in purgatory, but I understand why people end up drawn to that view. Because there is something to heaven will be perfect, and we will be perfect in heaven. And when we die, we won't, right, be perfect. We're all works in progress. And so it makes sense. But I think there is room in the Lutheran tradition, and definitely in the scriptures and Christianity, for the fact that God does prepare us here for there. The waters of heaven will be sweeter for bitter waters we have here. As we grow in virtue here, if we are growing in virtue, I'm not talking progressive sanctification or not progressive sanctification, or like libertarian sanctification.
We gain wisdom, yeah.
Yeah. In those moments, I do get a glimpse. I am more like what will be instinctive or second nature in heaven. And so maybe that, the Christ is present here, but then he's also preparing a place for us and preparing us for it, which I think plays into the discontent you mentioned. And I think that that discontent is both healthy and can be bad. Bonhoeffer really plays on this in his Ethics. That discontent is good insofar as it keeps us from being incarnation but not resurrection people, where we think this world is so important, which it is because Christ came into it, that we make it the ultimate, which it's not. So that can be problematic. But at the same time, the discontent can remind us to be resurrection people and ascension people, that Christ is preparing a place for us. And so there's a balance in there. Just as Christ ascends, but what does he do? He sends his church into the world. And what does he send his church into the world with? They're stewards of his mysteries. He sends his church into the world with his presence and word and sacrament.
Yeah, so, first of all, again, he continues to come in a physical way, and what we mean by that is a real way, right? It's not just he's living on in my heart, whatever that means.
It's not some presence that I have to conjure up a sense for.
And that he is active, and that his activity actually does things. Back to the discontent thing, we talked about this a few other times too, but I think it's really helpful to understand the symbol. Your anthropology, you're a sinner and a saint, and the saint is discontent for righteous reasons because she has no other option because she is righteous. And so she is discontent because she knows there's something better, and this is not the way it's supposed to be, and it shouldn't be this way. It should be discontent. The sinner, he's discontent in a different way, in a selfish way. like I'm owed something different. Owed something better. He's still stuck in a righteousness by law a thought pattern. So yeah, and something I think we probably need to talk more about. We've talked about the idea of formation, God forming us, and this dovetails into the theology of the cross, because a theologian of the cross is made.
Yeah, and faith attacks the old Adam. Yep. Faith attacks the sinful nature. We do mortify the flesh, right? That there is work being done on us by God, and through faith.
Yeah, and God's doing that work, and as we like to say, we Lutherans like to say, he doesn't really attack your worst. He'll attack your worst. He attacks your best.
Yeah.
He attacks your best so that you don't grab onto it as if it is the ultimate thing, but also more importantly, so that you don't trust it or trust yourself. And so,
and when that happens, the Ascension reminds us that, like a good physician, right, the one who rules all things is doing that. We're undergoing surgery for a long-term good.
Yeah. So the Ascension, it's such an applicable thing for every time. And those 5 Ascension promises, all of them are applicable, but I think maybe there are moments in time when one stands out, right?
I think every time and place has different ones of those that need to be emphasized.
Yeah, and maybe we could talk a little bit about sending the Spirit. So some of us will take this to be, just Pentecost. Some will take it to be verbal inspiration to the apostles. So they're gonna remember things, so that then they can speak those things and eventually write those things, right? And then some will take it as just, you're going to all have the Spirit because you're going to have faith. And I suppose some people are going to say, well, then you have charismatic gifts. Well, I take it as all of the above, right? You have a specific sending of the Spirit that for the apostles and Mary, if you read carefully, I believe she was there. And then also that this would be verbal inspiration for some of them at least. And then that, because of that verbal inspiration, the Spirit has this tool to come to me. So it's not like an either or. When Peter gets verbal inspiration, well, what about me? Well, I get the benefits of that because I have Peter's eyewitness testimony. He was able to remember, right? The Spirit was able to give him total recall, if you want to put it that way. And then charismatic gifts, in the early church, certainly we see those. And we could expand gifts, right, to the gifts that Paul lists: charity, right, encouragement, those types of things. I'm preaching on Pentecost, so I should make some notes right now about that stuff. Yeah.
Or just play this episode.
Just get up there.
They have the audio capability, and they can put the video up even.
That's right.
Just put this up on the screen.
I don't even have to show up.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be good.
I think this is a good new strategy.
I don't think that'd be good. I'm pretty sure that there are some churches that do stuff like that.
Yeah. So again,
it's not very bodily.
Yeah. Just to get a little bit more back to the present, because I do think this is one of the big challenges for the church today. And I just, as someone who's in the parish again, I've found it so, like, when people start realizing God is here in this way, like he's here in this supper, his body and blood with bread and wine. He is in my baptism. He is the one granting me absolution through God's called worker. He is the one speaking to me through the preached word. This matters, right? And then this reorients how we do everything, and it becomes impactful. And so then I am sent out, having been fed, washed, cleansed for my vocations. And I don't need to make my vocations ministry, because ministry is rooted in word and sacrament. My vocations can be my vocations, and then I can take what I've received and, when appropriate, let it shape and share it in my daily life. it wasn't as if when you had the temple of God and the Ark of the Covenant that the rest of life didn't matter, but it was, this is where God is promised to be here, and then he's with me as I go out. And it's kind of like when you get the, surely I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. Great. Okay. Wherever two or three are gathered in my name, well, what do we think gathered in my name means? Is this just we're watching the Packer game together? No, Christ is saying, when you gather, say it the Lutheran way, for the divine service.
In my name means something.
When you gather for word and sacrament, I'm there. And this doesn't diminish the rest of life. It actually exalts it. It says the rest of life is so important that I want you to take a break from it. One day, right? Sabbath day, rest day, so that I can feed you for it, so that I can instruct you for it, so I can help you see how I've gone to work on you in it, that you might confess your sins where you've fallen short, but also delight in where I've borne fruit for you. And so ministry can then be ministry, Article 5 of the Augsburg Confession, right? That God is working through these means of grace, and life can be life, and life's source can be life's source, but then the living out of life can be neighbor-rooted too. And I think when we remember, and then I don't have to like conjure up a presence of God through other things. I can be confident where God is present. Instead, in the places that he said he will be. And I think that is, he's not left us. He is still here. And he's told us exactly where to find him. And we're so busy sometimes coming up with everything else to try to convince people, oh, God is real, God is with us, that we forget, like, yeah, God is real. He's really here. And this is where you can meet him. And this is where he reveals himself to you for who he is and what he does. And I think, Easter, we're caught up on what would it be like to walk and talk with Jesus? Christmas, what would it be like to see the baby Jesus? Ascension tells us, and he's still right here. Don't forget that. This is why the apostles could rejoice and not just be bummed after the ascension.
Yeah, and there's a couple points there that affect church and ministry here, right? We've talked about this before, that we actually in our modern West, let's say Protestant West, really do not understand the very basics of what worship is. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And part of it is, I think the main part of it is, we don't think about coming in the presence of God because we don't have a category for the presence of God, because we don't think about vocation.
Because God is an idea and an abstraction, and we have what's actually more of like a view you'd find in Judaism or Islam of this radical other distant God.
Yeah. And the incarnation like solves this for us, right? That, yeah, he is other, but then he took on flesh. And this is something where the East sort of looks at the West and go, what are you doing? What are you doing with all of this hyper emotional, charismatic stuff when it's right there? And so I think, to your point, if you don't,
and a lot of their church architecture in this way connects to the Old Testament in the way that God was present in his temple or in the ark, that they're connecting the incarnation to this presence in a way that sometimes our buildings downplay the presence other than an intellectual notion.
Yeah, and so when we talk about the so-called worship wars of the last few decades, it's all nonsense because you're not asking the actual question what worship is. We think we're the subject of the sentence. We assume a free will, and then therefore we assume that it's about an intellectual decision or some sort of emotional moment. Worship should be intellectual and emotional, but
it's aimed at the whole person. Yeah.
But it's not something like this distant grandfather God. It's actually you're coming in the presence of God, and these are one of the things that like you don't solve that. You don't solve that in one lifetime. These are big philosophical eras that have to come and go, and our philosophical era has a lot of good things to it that we're better at than the medieval church was. Even better at the Reformation church era. But let's not be so arrogant to think that we have it all figured out. And then when it comes to ministry, just the the downplaying of your regular day life, that I need to feel spiritual in my stuff. I need to participate. I need to be the one who is performing at worship or leading worship or whatever it is. Okay. Again, the debate comes to authority and power and don't hurt people's feelings and making sure that relationships are correct. But that's all surface level stuff. The deeper question is, why do you have such a desire to not be passive? Why do you have such a desire to be active in this? Not active in your vocations and in your day-to-day life, actually talking to people in a normal setting, but why are you so... Why is there such a desire to be active in the public performance? It'd be like all of the ancient Israelites being like, my turn to be priest, get out of this way. Otherwise, I don't feel that I'm involved. Well, notice that you have chose activity rather than a passive nature. Now you're dangerously close to this mixing law and gospel. Be still. Be still.
Yeah, I enjoy sometimes when I get a chance to listen to A Brief History of Power, which is what Adam Kuntz and Willie Grills, two LCMS pastors, and they had an episode on, they like to talk about Japan. And they talked about the story behind the movie Silence. And so one of the things they talked about was Martin Scorsese's Silence movie. So I watched that this week. Kind of grade, take a break. And these two Jesuits go to Japan when Japan's starting to persecute Christians because you've got Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, and English influence, and they're reacting to that.
By the way, Japanese. If you're an island nation, you tend to be a little bit. And the Japanese were unique in that way as opposed to other Asian countries, but that's a different story.
Well, and they are. You can understand how they would confuse Christianity with the nationalism or economic gains these other nations were trying to make. But anyways, these two Jesuits get sent to find out if this other Jesuit got killed or apostatized, whatever. And kind of the lousier of the Jesuit priests, as he set up early, is martyred with Japanese Christians being martyred. The other one eventually apostatizes, but it's Scorsese. There's a question of what it all means. But at one point, someone does point out to him, none of the Japanese lay people being martyred are identifying themselves with Jesus. But this guy, when he was praying, kept talking about how he felt like Christ in Gethsemane, or, this and that. And, I thought that is a Western way that we think about these things. I do that you see yourself as doing Jesus-like things. So if you're at the Sermon on the Mount, do I want to be the guy saying things or the one just listening, right? And I do think there's something too. What these men were sent out to do at the Ascension only takes place as activity after the passivity of 3 years of listening.
Or should have been.
Right, sometimes half listening. They spill over after they've been filled up. They speak of glory only after they've gone through witnessing and experiencing the confusion of suffering. And we want to skip a lot of steps in that. I want to skip a lot of steps to that. And there's a certain hubris in that, and this Jesuit becomes aware of this as he's, examining his conscience. But yeah, I do start to think God needs my activity somehow for his kingdom, rather than recognizing God is present in word and sacrament, and he wants some people to take it. And lest we take it too seriously and think it depends on the man, he calls people like Michael and Wade, or if you go to a seminary.
Not the brightest dudes.
Yeah, we're speaking for ourselves, right?
Fisherman from Galilee, tax collector.
Yeah, and so rather than seeing this as the way Scripture speaks of this is we're doubly responsible for the task entrusted to us because we're stewards, because we're holding this treasure in jars of clay, right? There's a passivity that should be there for the ministry, but even as pastors, we can want to make it an activity. And I think that, lo, I am with you always, that wherever two or three are gathered, that I will not leave you as orphans, that I am preparing a place for you. And by the way, he is preparing us for that place, is a very healthy reminder for me and for other Christians.
And the only way you learn that lesson is probably in the parish. You can intellectually know that lesson of humility, but you probably need to get smacked on the head a few times. So this is a maybe one point before I make that point. There is such a thing as co-suffering with Christ.
There's a lot of sirens today, by the way. I apologize to our listeners. We have asked society nicely not to have emergencies when we're recording.
And don't have crime.
Because we are being active here.
Yeah, that's right.
And trying to build the kingdom of God. And they're really getting in the way of that.
There is such a thing that we don't talk about enough as that co-suffering with Christ. But remember, you don't choose your crosses. They're laid before you. So this is not a negative theology of glory. And again, the very nature of how God operates is hidden, ordinary ways. We can't say it enough that we need more pastors. But if you have a pastor, your congregation doesn't need another pastor. You know what it needs? Good mothers and grandmothers and good carpenters and plumbers who actually are in the real world. And so there's always been this idea that in order for me to be spiritual, I need to actually be doing something either public or I need to, like, every 5 minutes remind somebody that this is to the glory of God and Jesus loves them. That's just not how relationships work. It's not how God has set it up. He set it up for you to play the long game, to be in your vocations, to be light and salt. Now, I understand the criticism when someone says, the old, whether he said it or not, the old, I'm sure he did, said, preach the gospel, use words if you,
Sure,
yeah, you're not going to get the gospel without the words. I know that. But you got to get to the moment where you have the words, and the words are going to actually mean something. And the setting for evangelism is your vocation, right? We need you to be the listeners in church. We need you to be Martha, right? Martha, yeah.
I can never keep them straight.
And then
we need you to be that sister
who listens, because you need to be made so bold. And I don't mean bold like you're on fire for Jesus. I mean bold enough that you're willing to take somebody's question about why God allowed evil. And then in those moments when you can when you've built a relationship with a coworker, a relative, or whatever, that's where evangelism happens. So we kind of get a little bit too worked about getting everybody involved in Sunday morning, which is a good thing. Everybody involved in Sunday morning, and that checks the box. We're not really actually doing the thing we actually need to be doing. And this goes again to the idea of worship. I'm the subject of the worship sentence. This is a performance rather than it is a passive receiving of God's good gifts. Then I spill over into the world.
We're going to crown him with many crowns. I'm not there to get my applause or my, flowers. But I think connected to that.
Or just somebody who says, my ministry, that just grates me the wrong way.
Yeah. So if we're thinking of the presence of Christ, when Christ came in his incarnation, and he's still incarnate, right? But he came in his earthly ministry. What did they say? They said, come and see. Come and see. We're called to say the same today. And all the pastor is the one saying, oh, yeah, here it is. The way the early church grew, we tend to focus on he sends out the apostles. Okay, and now the apostles went and they built this. Well, the apostles went and they were like, yep, oh, here it is. Here is Christ in word and sacrament. Lay people, slaves, rich sellers of purple dye, jailers, formerly blind and lame, people of every ethnicity, they took their vocation seriously. They served as they were called to serve. They submitted as they were called to submit. And as we will hear this Sunday, when someone asked for the reason, the hope they have, they said, "Come and see." They said, "Come and see." And Ascension isn't the end of come and see because now Christ is in heaven. Ascension is come and see Christ who is present here now, who wants to bring you to heaven and has prepared a place. It's heaven and earth again,
crashing together.
into each other. Yes.
Yeah, God's always located, always has been. So we're kind of at time here. We kind of got critical at the end there, but we hope that you go away with this idea that we're being critical of like an unnecessary law for you, that you have to look other places or look inside of yourself or perform. We really want you to go, here is where he is. He said, I am the Word. This is my body and blood. This is not some sort of vague sort of climb a high mountain, look inside of your heart, like you said, conjure him up. But he's very gracious in his way to say, this is where you find me. And for your convenience, we pastors do it every Sunday and sometimes Wednesdays and coming up on a Thursday. And you're gonna get some freedom from the law. And so I think once you get that, you know, it's off your shoulders, this idea, and there's nothing left to do but let the bird fly.
These music levels, Mike, are really going to be interesting, but I apologize to our listeners while this plays.
You can hear out of those headphones, too. That was kind of at least the intro.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if our listeners got that twice now. We shall see.
Every evening when the sun goes down, getting my